Okay, guys. So this is lesson 5 for our PSTM, or Strategies in Teaching Health Education, specifically for medical laboratory scientists. So anyways, this time we're going to talk about learning styles, or learning theories rather. Okay, so but anyways, as an introduction, I don't think any of you really need this lecture, this recorded video lecture, because you've very much done well in our quiz. So, despite not having the discussion, I think you guys exceed very much in concepts. In which case, we're going to make this a bit shorter than I would have if you did not perform very well in our quiz. But, anyways, learning theories are concepts and propositions that explain why people learn and predict what circumstances they will learn. So, we as people, we as persons have different learning styles, and we prefer different learning environments, we prefer different learning techniques, and so on and so forth. So, learning theories is here to help us explain why or how we learn. So, we have three major learning theories. You have your behaviorist theories, your cognitive theories, and your social learning theories, all of which we're going to discuss bit by bit. Starting with, of course, the first one, which is the behaviorist theory. So, this is the earliest formal theory for learning, and it is used for children. It's focused on studying thoughts and feelings, fears, and phobia. So, the major theorists are John Watson and Guthrie, Thorndike, and Skinner. So John Watson basically defined behavior as a muscle movement and began studying behavior because it is more objective. So sabi daw po ni John Watson, behavior is muscle movement. So basically what you do with your actions is considered to be your behavior. Ang sabi naman ni Watson and Guthrie, this is contiguity theory, believe that even a skill such as walking is learned through a series of conditioned responses. So, si Watson and Guthrie, they believe that or rather, our behavior or any given skill is a kind of learned response from a certain stimulus. So for example, para siyang conditioning na meron tayo, or we are conditioned to perform specific task. So they basically broke it down as if we were computers. So familiar with if and then statements. So that's how Watson and Guthrie viewed behavior and skills. And then Thorndike and Skinner believed in the reinforcement theory, which proposed that stimulus-response bonds are strengthened by reinforcement, such as reward or punishment. So basically, ang sabi ni Thorndike and ni Skinner, kapag may ginawa ka daw mabuti, tapos binigyan ka ng reward, you're going to retain that behavior better. Kapag naman gumawa ka ng masama and then bigyan ka ng punishment, you're going to avoid that kind of response. So, di ba yung classic example po natin that ang isang bata or when a child touches a hot stove, tapos napaso siya, nasaktan siya, in the future, he's no longer going to repeat that kind of behavior. So that's what Thorndike and Skinner believed in. So reinforcement theory. Next is the cognitive learning theories. So cognitive science is a study of how our brains work in the process of perceiving, thinking, remembering, and learning. So basically, when you say cognitive science, it's how our brains process information. Okay? Information processing sometimes used to describe a subset of this field of study, and it explains the way that information is handled once it enters the senses, and how it is organized and stored. So basically, we're just gathering information with our senses, and then information processing is basically how our brains process that information. So paano ba natin pinaperceive ang mga bagay-bagay? Okay? And learning is an active process in which the learner constructs meaning based on prior knowledge and view of the world. So basically, this is basically processing our perspectives, our perceptions, and then compiling it or stockpiling it on our previous view. So pinapalitan natin constantly yung previous views natin until we come up with learning. Okay, ang theories naman po natin dito is Breuer. I don't know how to pronounce that name, but for as long as you know the spelling, learning is a process whereby the novice becomes an expert, which is correct. Sabi naman ni Fedden ng 1994, an active process which the learner constructs meaning based on prior knowledge and view of the world. So that is one interesting point of view. Sometimes when we see something we don't understand, we don't have an idea kung paano tayo magre-react. Diba? Kapag may nakita kayong isang bagay, oh, ano yun? Hindi ko alam. You don't know how to react. You don't know if you're surprised, if you're scared. You have that mixed feelings or emotions. And ang sabi ni Fedden, it's an active process which a learner constructs meaning. So basically, kapag nakakita ka ng isang bagay, your mind is going to go to places kung saan nakakita ka ng similar na mga bagay. And then you're going to basically reconstruct an idea of what that is. So you're going to learn in that way. Sabi naman ni Ausubel noong 1963, who developed the earliest model of cognitive learning, the subsumption theory of meaningful verbal learning, and the new information is subsumed into existing thought and memory structure. So sabi niya, kapag nakakita daw tayo ng bagong information or we gather new information, that is going to subsume into the existing thought and memory structures. So, i-merge daw natin yung bagong information na yon sa dating alam na natin. And the meaningful learning is thought to occur only if existing cognitive structures are organized and differentiated. So basically, sinasabi niya dito that learning is thought to occur. Nangyayari lang daw yung learning natin kapag meron na tayong foundation. Sabihin, nandun na yung basics. That is why this is also still unbelievable, di ba? 1963 pa niya sinabi. But Ausubel, this scientist, the theory is still applicable until now. That's the reason why whenever we have new topics to introduce to our students, we always start with the definition of terms. Sometimes we start with a review of the concepts and the theories so they could understand better. Okay? And repetition of meaningful material and its use in various contexts would enhance the retention of the material. So, totoo po yan. This is further elaborated upon by Dr. Maria Montessori. She's an Italian teacher and a doctor, Italian doctor, who basically devised the Montessori system of learning, wherein you have this physical objects and you have this repetition until mastery is achieved. Okay, so more on that later. Next, Rumelhart says that in 1980, the concept of schema or schemata, all knowledge is packaged into units. These units are called schemata, which are knowledge structures that store concepts and the knowledge of how to use them in memory. So basically, sinasabi ni Rumelhart that our knowledge is basically stored in what is called a schemata or schemata. And you have your three kinds of learning based on the schema theory. So you have your accretion, which is the learning of facts. New information is added to existing schemata and no changes are made to existing knowledge. So basically you're just collecting information. And then you have your tuning, which is the schema evolution, wherein the schema evolve or is refined throughout the lifespan as new situations and issues are encountered. So this is your, kumbaga sa ano natin sa profession natin, no? You call this the continuing professional development. So this is just basically changing your information or binabago natin yung paniniwala natin or yung mga information sa isip natin into a much better version of itself. So parang nag-update lang tayo ng ating information. And next, restructuring, which is the development of new schemata by copying an old schema and adding new elements that are different to create a new schema. So basically, this is innovation. Ito na yung kinukuha natin yung dati nating idea and we're turning it into something new by combining different information. Next, other theories or models of information processes. You have your level of processing theory, which means information is processed sequentially from perception to attention to labeling and meaning. This was later disproven because it's not actually a sequential process, but rather a simultaneous process. So ang sabi kasi ng level of processing theory, it's just a step-by-step process of these perception, attention, labeling, and meaning. So, napag-alaman natin ngayon na hindi pala totoo yan because we actually process, perceive, label, and give meaning to information all at the same time in our minds. Next, the parallel distribution model. So, information is processed by different parts of the memory system simultaneously rather than sequential. This is actually the preferred model in our modern times because it makes a lot more sense. Next is connectionistic model. The information is stored in any place throughout the brain, forming a network of connections. So, basically, lahat daw ng parts ng brain natin, it stores random information and it makes connections, and those connections are what our memory is. Stage theory of information processing relates to memory activity. Information is both processed and stored in three stages. So, sensory, short-term, and long-term memory. So, stage theory of information processing. Okay, three stages. You have your sensory memory, which is fleeting or passing swiftly. So after you touch something, after you taste something, after that that something has already gone, you're not going to taste it anymore. You're not going to touch it anymore because again, it's gone. So which means it's fleeting or passing swiftly. Now, when you say short-term memory, this needs interest and retain indefinitely if rehearsed or meaningful to us. So, kaya po yung mga short-term memory packets natin, naaalala natin kapag malaki yung meaning sa atin. And of course, long-term memory sometimes uses mnemonic devices because we want to encode it deep into our memory so that in the future, kapag kailangan natin yung information, we can still bring it up. Common concepts of cognitive theory. So you have learning, you could have behaviorist, requisition of knowledge and skills that changes a person's behavior. So ito po yung perception ng ating theories sa ating mga concepts. No? So learning, sabi daw ng behaviorist, kapag nagkaroon ka daw ng bagong skills and knowledge, I think you would agree with this one, it would change a person's behavior. Like for example, this applies no kapag meron tayong yung tinatawag nating lumalaki yung ulo. And no, not that kind of lumalaki ang ulo you're thinking. Lumalaki ang ulo meaning na yumayabang yung tao. So when he learns something, when he achieves something, yumayabang na siya. So it has a change in behavior. So when you learn a skill, you have or that changes your behavior. And ang sabi naman ng cognitive theories, it focuses more on the acquisition of knowledge than on the resulting behavior. So sa learning daw, learning is not necessarily connected to behavior, but rather it's connected to the information or the knowledge that we collect. Okay, sabi naman ni Feden sa meron tayong domain-specific learning. Okay, and next we have metacognition, which is sometimes defined as thinking about one's thinking. A process that learners use to gauge or measure their thinking while reading, studying, or problem solving. It is to know what they know and what they do not know. It applies journal writing, group dialogue, problem-based learning, and the rationalization of test questions. So kapag sinabi po nating metacognition, it's not necessarily looking out. Ibig sabihin, hindi tayo kumukuha ng information from other sources. We're evaluating what we already know. So kaya 'di ba meron tayong rationalization of test questions. That's a very good example because when you rationalize test questions, you're actually questioning what you know or how you know these answers or how you don't know these answers. So these are evaluating your problem solving skills, you're measuring your thinking while reading. So basically, metacognition is evaluating your learning and your own thinking. Next is memory. Memory is a sensory short, it can be sensory short term or long term, and it undergoes consolidation. So basically, kapag na-determine na ng utak natin, ito important information to, kailangan kong tandaan to, we have this what you call consolidation. And then you have chunking, which information is clustered into patterns. Ito na po yung one of the memory tricks na ginagawa po ng mga performers is that they associate they associate pieces of information to certain objects. Like for example, kapag sinabihan mo sila ng sabihin mo ay Staphylococcus aureus. Okay, they're going to think about what a Staphylococcus aureus is, but since they don't have an idea, paano ba nila paano ba nila tatandaan? So they're going to think, oh, staff. Staff sounds like a staff. So parang isipin nila yung mga workers sa McDonald's or sa Jollibee are all balls, or rather are all cocci, sphere-shaped bacteria na gumagalaw dun sa loob ng McDonald's. So in that case, alam mo na, oh, McDonald's. And then you're going to relate that to Staphylococcus aureus. So basically, you're clustering something into patterns. So you're trying to look for patterns and you're going to group them together. Ito mga bacteria to. So dito siya sa part ng brain ko na to. Ito mga rods or mga bacilli. So dito yan sa part ng brain ko sa kabila. Next, transfer is the ability to take information learned in one situation and apply it to the other. So basically, this is natutunan mo sa isang bagay and then i-apply mo sa kabila. Saying concepts and principles are used or adopted not just to one particular situation, but to all other situations as well. So isipin nyo guys, may mga natutunan na ba kayo sa buhay nyo na in-apply nyo sa ibang aspeto ng buhay? Meron na ba? Hopefully, yes. Okay? Next, successful transfer depends on several factors. The extent to which the material was originally learned, so ibig sabihin, gaano mo ba na-master yung material na yon? Next, the ability to retrieve information from memory. So kung hindi mo naman natatandaan or hindi mo naalala, hindi mo rin siya matatransfer. Next, the way in which the material was taught and learned. So paano mo siya natutunan? And next, the similarity to the new situation to the original. So ano daw yung pagkakapareho nung original situation mo doon sa natutunan mo. Okay? Or doon sa i-apply mo na bago. Next, we have social learning theories. So this is propagated by Albert Bandura in 1977 and otherwise known as your observational learning theory. So it explains that behavior is the result of an interaction among the person to the environment and the behavior itself. So kapag sinabi natin social learning theories, the keyword would be your social. Ibig sabihin na to, we're not only considering the person himself or herself, we're considering the environment as well, which means yung physical, social, yung mga taong nakapaligid sa kanya, yung upuan niya, yung table niya, yung laptop niya, yung notes niya, and so on and so forth. So, social learning theories involves other materials, other people in the theory. So people learn as they are in constant interaction with their environment. And you have your key components, you have your modeling, attentional processes, retention processes, and motivation. So basically, sinasabi lang natin dito that people learn as they are in constant interaction with their environment. We're saying as long as we are in an environment, nasasanay tayo. Which I think you can observe for yourself, di ba? Kapag nasa bahay nyo kayo, which you've been living in for a very long time, kung matagal na kayo dyan sa bahay nyo, alam na alam niya kung nasan lahat. Alam niyo, you know it like the back of your hand. So you know where the chargers are, you know where the outlets are, you know how to operate the switches, you know everything about it. Pero once you go into the house of your classmate, once you go into the house of someone you don't know, once you're a guest in another house, naninibago na naman tayo. Diba? Although they have similar furniture, they have basically they have same tables, pareho yung TV nila, naninibago pa rin tayo because we're not in the environment in which we commonly interact with. Okay, and that's also one of the reasons why home-based learning is such a hassle and is such a tiring task. Kasi hindi tayo sanay sa ganito. So, we we have conditioned ourselves na kapag nasa classroom tayo, it's a place of learning, at least yun yung nasa isip natin. Ibig sabihin, work mode tayo sa school. Pero since nasa bahay tayo, nandun tayo sa bahay mode, sa relax mode. That's why working at home and learning at home is a challenge for all of us. It's because we have this social learning. According to the social learning theory, we have interacted with our homes in such a manner that it's not the best for learning and working. So yun yung nagiging problema natin ngayon. Okay, so key components of the social learning theory, modeling. Learning occurs as a result of observing other people's behavior and its consequences. So this is one of the things na kailangan nating i-apply because once you are in the laboratory, you're going to have to watch your professors, especially when you're in the skill-based laboratory sessions. So panoorin natin yung mga professors natin. Once we, for example, tapos na mag-demo si professor, sino na yung papanoorin natin? Eh di yung classmate natin na marunong. Okay, so basically, we're trying to model our behavior or our learning from other people. So pinapanood natin sila para matuto tayo. Next is attentional processes, which determines which model behavior will be learned. So just because ginagaya natin yung isang tao, for example, si Sir Jeremy, nakita natin, ginagaya natin, it does not mean na lahat ng ginagawa ko gagayahin nyo na. Okay, so that is attentional processes. You're basically picking apart kung ano yung kailangan nyo matutunan from me, and then yun yung i-retain natin. Okay? So, since retention na po tayo, it refers to the ability to retain model behaviors in permanent memory. So, nakita nyo ako, for example, nag-extract, meron akong isang habit na nagustuhan nyo. For example, yung hawak ko ng syringe while pulling the plunger. Nagustuhan nyo yun? So, you're going to retain, nakita nyo yun, ay, ganito pala gumawa si Sir Jeremy. Parang mas madali kapag ganito. So, i-retain nyo yung process na yun. Okay? Next, motivation through valued outcomes or rewards. After punishing outcomes, it is perceived reward is a good motivator. So kapag motivation daw po natin, basically, bago tayo matuto, kailangan may motivation muna tayong matuto. 8 types of learning. You have your signal learning, which is conditioned response. So the simplest level, ito yung, if you remember Pavlov's experiment with the dog. So this is signal learning. You have your conditioned response. Pag narinig niyo yung, narinig niyo yung Bayang Magiliw, yung national anthem of the Philippines, your conditioned response is to stand up and then put your hand over your left chest and then stand up properly. You have your stimulus response learning, which develops a voluntary response to a specific stimulus or combination of stimuli. You have your chaining, which is the acquisition of a series of related conditioned responses or stimulus response connections. So basically, yung stimulus response learning, meron kayong motivation or meron kayong nakitang stimuli, and then may ginawa kayong bago. Or may ginawa kayong task. Kapag naman chaining, sunod-sunod na stimulus response learning. And next is yung verbal association. So it's a type of chaining in the process of learning medical terminology. So basically, in verbal association, we're trying to associate our medical terms into our commonly used terms in our lives para hindi tayo mahirapan, tandaan siya. You also have discrimination learning, which is the more new chains that are learned, the easier it is to forget previous chains. Tama yan. Habang natututo tayo ng mas maraming information, nahihirapan tayong i-retain yung mga information na natutunan na natin dati. Okay, so it is to retain large number of chains, you need to discriminate among them. Kailangan mong piliin kung ano yung pinakakailangan mo sa kanila at yung mga hindi mo kailangan. So, para ma-retain natin. Next, concept learning. It's learning how to classify stimuli into groups represented by a common concept. You also have your rule learning. A rule is a chain of concepts or relationship between concepts. So, ito na po yung may if and then relationships. Kapag ganyan, ganito yung sagot. Kapag ganito yung tanong, ganyan yung sagot. Next, you have problem solving, which is the highest level of learning, and this is my favorite type of learning. It applies previously learned rules that relate to situations. So, processes of formulating and testing hypothesis. Kapag sinabi nating problem solving, this is the application of all the different concepts that you've learned into your problem. So, kapag may problema tayo, gamitin natin lahat ng resources natin mentally para ma-solve yung problem natin. Okay? So that is part one of our lesson 5. Again, I don't see much of a necessity with this one kasi you've performed extraordinarily well. I've seen the average is around 85 to 87%. So, congratulations. And anyways, I'll see you in the next, or rather, I'll talk to you to the next part.